Hey, it's ShadowACS again. Today I'm gonna shift gears a bit and talk about an older anime from way back in the 90s. Outlaw Star was a pretty big hit when it came out, but one that nobody ever really talks about anymore. I sometimes hear it cited alongside Cowboy Bebop and Trigun as one of the great sci-fi anime of the late 90s. I've tried watching both of those shows at different points and never really got into them because, well, they just didn't really seem like my thing. So naturally, I didn't really have much interest in checking out Outlaw Star either. But I was eventually peer pressured by a friend into watching it, and yeah, it is pretty damn good. This is Outlaw Star. The first thing I'll say about Outlaw Star that might give me some hate is, it's not perfect. I think people really tend to look back at 90s anime like this with rose-colored glasses because they came out during a time when everyone thought everything was the greatest thing ever even when it wasn't. As opposed to now when everyone likes to act like everything is the worst thing ever even when it's really good. Funny how we've come full circle that way. Watching this anime now kinda made me feel like I'd stepped into a time machine. This whole era of late 90s sci-fi anime was one I pretty much missed. I was too young for them when they first came out, and I never really had any interest in seeing them since. So it was kinda fascinating to take a look at this genre with fresh eyes and a modern perspective. And I should state that I don't think Outlaw Star holds up perfectly by today's standards. It's definitely corny and a little dated. But considering how badly a lot of other popular 90s anime hold up today, I think it's pretty impressive how entertaining it still manages to be. So let's take a look at the story. The main character of Outlaw Star is a man named Gene Starwind. Wow, that's really the name we're going with, huh? What was your first choice, Captain Space Awesome? Sounds like the name of a Spaceballs character.
Not so fast, Lone Star.
Helmet. At last we meet for the first time for the last time.
So, Gene Starwind, God, I'm never gonna be able to take this character seriously, operates a business doing odd jobs along with his cool kid genius sidekick named Jim, whose parents are never seen or mentioned, and it's never explained why he's hanging out with a grown-ass man twice his age. Yeah, this would raise a lot more eyebrows if it came out today. One day, Gene and Jim get hired on for a bodyguard assignment by an outlaw named Hilda, who's run afoul of an army of space pirate ninja wizards. No, I'm not making that up, that's literally what they are. They have a hair-raising adventure together battling against the pirates, during which they come across a cryogenically frozen android girl named Melfina, who's trying to find out why she was created. And after a series of space battles, Gene comes into possession of his very own spaceship, which he decides to name the Outlaw Star. Gene also learns that Hilda was looking for a legendary place called the Galactic Ley Line, so he decides to search for it himself, hoping he might find clues to Melfina's origins there. Along the way, he comes across a few other colorful characters who join him on his quest, including an angry cat-like alien girl named Aisha, and a kimono-wearing assassin named Twilight Suzuka, who kills people with what I think is either a wooden sword or a katana she never takes out of its sheath. I guess the idea is she just hits people with it so hard they die. Yeah. So as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff in this show that was probably pretty cool when it came out, but is definitely silly today. I mean, for God's sake, the main character's name is Gene Starwind. How much more 90s can you get? But silly as it is, it does manage to be really entertaining throughout most of it. And there are one or two things that are just as cool now as they were back then. One of my favorite examples of this is the designs of the spaceships. They don't just shoot laser beams at each other like in a Star Wars movie. A lot of them actually have arms they can use to hold guns and melee weapons, and at times even fight with each other like sumo wrestlers. That's awesomely creative. The one show I was constantly comparing Outlaw Star to while watching it was Firefly, and afterwards I learned that a lot of people also made that same connection. There's definitely some obvious similarities between the two, like the idea of a group of roguish main characters aboard a spaceship traveling through different planets, trying to make a living, and occasionally getting involved in stuff that's not entirely legal. They even have the image of a cryogenically frozen girl waking up inside a smuggled suitcase. I'd be shocked if the creators of Firefly didn't get that directly from Outlaw Star. The main difference is that Outlaw Star has much more of a structured, centralized narrative tying the whole story together, as opposed to it just being a collection of episodes. And that does also tie into the only major problem I have with it. I think the motivation behind the story in this show is pretty damn weak. I really never gave a shit about whether Gene found the Galactic Ley Line. And the main reason is the story didn't really give me a reason to. I mean, we know Melfina's past is tied into it, but that's it. It's not like she's going to die if she doesn't find out. It just seemed like a pretty thin source of motivation to be the driving force behind the entire plot of the show. Even the eventual reveal of what the galactic ley line is and how Melfina is involved in it isn't really that surprising. It's just kind of what you'd expect. In my opinion, the show is at its best when it does feel most like an episode of Firefly, and it just focuses on Jean and Jim trying to get jobs done and interacting within this show's universe. There's a lot of character to it and a lot of creativity. And speaking of which, the character cast is pretty damn solid too. I'll admit I didn't think that much of the cast when the show first started, but they really grew on me after a while. You really do get a sense of their friendship and camaraderie as a crew, and for the individual relationships they all share with each other. I also like that this cast is just big enough for what the show is trying to do. It's not like an Attack on Titan where they cram it full of more characters than anyone can possibly keep track of. Instead, there's only about 7 or 8 major ones. And because they keep focused on such a small cast, you really feel like you get more attached to these people and can get to know them better. Jean Starwind, once you get past the silly name, is a pretty good main character. I do feel like this is a kind of main character I've seen a bunch of times before. He's a cocky, reckless adventurer, he's quick-witted, he's a womanizer, he's smooth but he's also kind of annoying, and deep underneath it all, he's got a heart of gold. He's basically this show's answer to characters like Star-Lord. But at the same time, this is a kind of character I feel like I usually see more often in American shows and movies than anime. And it is a trope I kind of enjoy, so I don't see a problem with it here. Jim is also a pretty fun sidekick. Despite being a kid, he's the more level-headed one, constantly getting on Jean's case about him spending too much money and being reckless. On the whole, they make a really fun, memorable pair. I also like Melfina a lot, though again, I do think I've seen this kind of character plenty of times before. Though to be fair, Melfina was probably one of the earlier versions of characters like this. She's essentially Lilu from The Fifth Element, the naive supernatural or sci-fi girl who hasn't really seen much of the world and has a very innocent, childlike mindset. Again, it's a trope, but it's one I like a lot. As you'd imagine, there's also kind of a romance that develops with her and Jean, which is sweet enough, though it doesn't really get much focus. Even Aisha I started to like after a while. When this angry, screaming cat girl showed up, I thought, okay, here it is, the annoying comic relief that's going to be a pain in the ass throughout the whole show. But once she actually joins the crew and we see more of her interactions with the rest of the team, I started to enjoy her a lot more. The villains are not bad, but not great either. The main ones they fight throughout most of the show are these two mercenaries called the McDougal brothers, who have a connection to Jean's past. There's a couple things about them that are kind of interesting, like the fact that they do seem to have a legitimate brotherly connection, and aren't just generic assholes willing to throw each other under the bus for the sake of greed. There's also kind of an interesting connection the younger brother Harry develops with Melfina later in the show, based on the fact that they're both artificially created bio-androids born in labs. At first it's just him angrily going after her, saying he loves her while she rejects his advances, stupid shit you've seen from every other lame villain on the planet. But the closer you get to the end of the show, the more their connection seems to deepen and get more interesting. I don't want to give too much away, and the show seems to be being intentionally vague about it as well. But in the end, I was kind of left wondering what their connection was after all they'd been through. And I mean that in the best way, where you sort of want to speculate about it as opposed to being frustrated by it. The show's universe is kind of cool, though I have to admit I didn't really see that much that differentiated it from any other sci-fi universe I've seen, aside from the designs of the spaceships, which I already talked about. Most of the planets they go to have the same general look and feel, and there's a couple interesting locations, like this ancient ruin they go to toward the end of the show. But I think that if you're into sci-fi universes in general, you'll probably be satisfied with this one. So on the whole, I thought Outlaw Star was fun. I will cynically say that I do think its reputation has a lot more to do with its age than how good it actually is. Like I said, I think people really over-glorify anime from the 90s like they're so much better than what's coming out nowadays, and, well, face it, they're not. And while Outlaw Star is definitely a bit dated, it is still an entertaining show. The characters are fun, their interactions are enjoyable, the universe is creative, and the action is pretty cool. If you're in the mood for something retro, or hell, just want to watch a good sci-fi anime for any reason, Outlaw Star is worth checking out. This is ShadowACS, and I'll see you next time.